Thank you, Casey. This is nice. How's your day been going?
Oh, it's seems like the thing to do. See it from that perspective.
I was just wondering. The only time I wear that
That's when
is if
you're
I'm
out.
at some city function or something like that, and then I wear it. But
Right.
here, everybody knows your name because it's in front of you.
That's a good point.
But if you'll notice, I don't think anybody's wearing one but you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, and then I
that's how
kind
we did too. We realized there's a sun.
yeah, right. Yeah, never really. That's a good point.
Thought you might
Yeah, never
hear that.
really.
Yeah.
Never really thought about it.
It doesn't matter because I don't think anybody cares. Yeah. Morning. And I figured 9 to 11, 9 to 1:30 with 1 5-minute break.
Oh my goodness.
It was last on the agenda. They moved it to last. I know. And they're requesting funding for another shower and laundry unit that can go outside of Oroville. So that's what they're looking for. He's in a hurry and left. Thanks a lot.
All open.
Okay, good. You know, the chicken's in the broiler.
It better be. I'm just going into the meeting, or I'm calling it to order. Okay. All right, bye. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Oroville City Council special meeting, January 28th, 2020. Would you stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Salute, pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Looking for a motion to adopt the agenda.
I move that we adopt the agenda.
I'll second that.
Oh, sorry.
Motion carries.
Okay, I'd like to remind everyone that this is a special meeting, and at special meetings, you are not allowed to speak on non-agenda items. So any item that you wish to speak on, please put your blue card in, but it will be limited to the items that are on the agenda. Looking for a motion to adopt the consent calendar, accept the consent calendar?
I move that we adopt the consent calendar.
I'll second.
I'm sorry, because I was looking down just to clarify, that was Smith for the second?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Okay, moving on to regular business. We have one item on regular business. It's warming center operations guideline. The council will provide staff with direction regarding the operational hours and guidelines for opening a warming center.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and council. As the council is aware, on the 16th of January, a warming center was opened in cooperation with the Haven of Hope Resource Center. At the time, staff had to come up with some parameters for when that warming center would be open and operational. At the time, staff came up with 40 degrees in conjunction with rain or imminent rain. And that was staff's attempt at setting some parameters on that. Since then, there has been some desire of part of the council to extend that in the community, to extend those parameters. Staff has looked into this, and there are varying warming center operational guidelines that exist within our local locale. Chico currently has guidelines that are 45 degrees combined with 3/4 of an inch of rain or more, or if the temperature is under 40 degrees with an average wind speed of 15 miles per hour or more. We've also looked at if there were any state regulations regarding warming centers. The only state regulations that we could locate were the state regulations provided through the California Department of Emergency Services for extreme cold and freeze emergencies. Those are surrounded more around a 32-degree temperature of when an extreme temperature event is occurring. So what we're looking for tonight is just general guidelines of when we will be operating a warming center, what staff can rely upon as to when to authorize that, the expenditure of those funds. So we just need council to set some guidelines for us so that we have the input of our council as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, I forgot to have you call the roll.
I did mark you all present.
Okay, thank you. All right, do we have any public speakers on this item?
Mr. Mayor, I have 7 speakers. The first speaker is Pastor Josh Jamison, and the next one will be Annie Terry.
Yes, please.
My name is Pastor Josh Jamison. I'm with the Hope Center, and I'm really just here to express the willingness of the Hope Center to participate in having an additional warming center. We don't want to compete with what's already going on, nor do we want to separate any funding that's currently going on, but we do, if you'd like to have more than one site available, we want to throw our hat in the ring. And that's about all I have. Any questions?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Well, I have a question. How many people could you accommodate, and what provisions have you made for a warming center?
Yeah, we have cots available, and then we also have blankets available, and those are the 2 main items. We'd also provide hot drinks and potentially a meal as well, small scale, and some soup, just to get people by.
And how many people could you accommodate?
We really could accommodate as many as 25,
Okay.
but it would really be at your discretion to decide what we have available based on our current location on Kittrick Avenue.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to remind council to push their button and request to speak, please, so we can maintain an orderly meeting. Thank you.
And Mayor, speaking out of turn, I just want to clarify, we've accepted all the speaker cards so that if anybody wants to speak, they don't get the card in by now, we've got our list.
Thank
We
you.
had several submitted after you made your comments.
Vice Mayor Thompson?
Follow-up question for you, Pastor. 25, is that 25 beds, cots, or is that, because I think you have more tables than that if they're just sitting.
Yes, we actually
Are you saying
have,
25 based on cots or beds, or 25 based on people who could sit at tables? Because I think, from my understanding, the warming center parameters are not necessarily sleeping, but people who can come in and sit at tables and whatnot.
yeah, we do have seats, we do have cots, and whatever framework is at the council's pleasure, whether people could utilize cots or not, we would follow your lead.
But I'm sorry, is the 25, is that because of cots, or is that seating for tables?
That was just a number that would establish an orderly environment in my mind.
Okay.
We could possibly facilitate more and would be willing to scale that back.
Got it.
I'd like to clarify for everyone that a warming center is not a shelter. There is no sleeping provisions made. It is simply an area to come in and gather and become warm. This is not a shelter. I don't want anyone mistaking it for that.
Yeah, it's not our desire to provide a shelter so much as a place to be warm, and understanding that it may be at nighttime and people can't help but fall asleep. And so that's just why we do have the cots available.
Right.
And again, we would follow whatever determinations are made, and have no desire to operate outside of what the desire of the city is.
Again, but I would like to remind
Yes,
everyone that
thank
if you
you.
provide cots and people are coming in and sleeping, then you are crossing the line into a shelter. And you're not permitted for that.
Fair enough. And so we do have tables available and would make use of those.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have just real quick. question.
Councilmember Smith?
So how many people can you seat in a dining setting in your facility?
We can seat close to 50. It might be a few less. Maybe it's 47, but something like that.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Nice to meet you.
Our next speaker is Annie Terry and then Chris Logan.
Hi, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the City Council. I think the important matter here is that we set a determined temperature and a determined weather condition that everyone can agree on, and go with that based on what funds are available through the city to fund this. That's basically what it comes down to. It comes down to dollars, and it comes down to weather conditions. So you guys have the job of figuring out what weather conditions and how many dollars that you have to spend on this. So good luck with that.
Well, I'd like to comment on that. The
Certainly.
warming center being a gathering place for people to get out of inclement weather for safety reasons is again, it's not a shelter. It is, so being a warming center, any one of you could be open anytime.
You know,
Any
we were
day.
open during the summertime as a cooling center.
Yes.
And we'd put some movies on. People could hang out in the chapel.
Yes.
We offered them snacks and cold drinks. And if they stayed into the evening, they were served lunch and a meal if they stayed
Sure.
into the evening, even if they chose not to stay overnight.
Sure.
So I get it. It's to get out of the elements.
Yes, exactly. And we're not saying, we're going to set some parameters, and we're not saying that these places, these ministries cannot be open when they want to for a warming center. We're just saying when the city will pay for it. Okay, thank you.
Chris Logan and then Pastor Steve Terry.
Good evening. Am I limited to only address the warming shelters themselves, or can I elaborate a little bit just on the homeless situation in general?
We're here for the warming center, sir, and it's only, this is a special meeting, so it's only agendized items.
Okay, all right. Well, I can probably break off on part of it. As far as warming centers, are there other facilities in the jurisdiction of the city that can be accommodated to use as warming shelters? Across the street, we have that vacant Ford dealership that could be used, and if necessary, use eminent domain to control that.
Absolutely.
But I had a little bit more than that. But if that's all I can talk about, then that's all I can talk about. But
Yes,
thank you.
thank you.
Our next speaker is Steve Terry and then Jim Elm.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. As you know, this is 22 years now, dear to my heart. I have pondered this and thought about this. I will be honest, and I'll probably get in trouble with some of my colleagues. Last meeting, the temperature of 50 degrees was mentioned. I will say that as I've watched the weather, even from then to here, our average temperature is right about there in the winter time. At the mission, we have a rule. If it rains, we let people come in. Because if it rains, you're going to get cold. That's just the way it is. If it's a heavy storm, whatever. If it's not raining, what Bill had read regarding what Chico does is a pretty good guideline. I was thinking 43 degrees, 50 is too high. I think that's a reasonable. We do look at wind chill. We do look at storms coming in. We follow all of that stuff. When we open the doors at the mission, even those that have been put out in inclement weather are allowed to come in. A warming center is exactly, Mayor, what you said. It is a center for warming. It is not a shelter. It's not a place for that. You can accommodate more people. The mission will stand ready to provide meals, whether it be Hope Center or Haven of Hope. We'll do that because that's what we do. And we don't mind about that. But we can overcomplicate this thing. We need to be reasonable with the temperature. And I think 40 to 43 was a good temperature. My personal opinion.
Thank you.
Jim Elm and then Lydia Karoon.
I suspect it's Jim Adams.
Adam, okay, that.
Lighten it up a little bit. Now, I'm going to reach in my pocket and withdraw a very safe thing. It's not a weapon. Okay. It's a thermometer. And there's a reason I brought it. I'll come to the point, though, and then I'll blow off what time I can.
Sir, I'd like to remind you that we're speaking about warming centers.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
I'm
you.
speaking directly to it.
Okay.
I'm recommending 55 degrees. And the basis for that is the bees will probably outsurvive us. And they're a lot smarter. And they don't go to work below 55 degrees. All right, principle number one. Principle number two, you got to take into account if the wind's blowing or not. Surely you're aware of this. Wind factor can change the actual effect on your body by a great deal. Also, if I measure different, this is a laser, they're wonderful at technology. I started my career as a physicist, and it happened to be in temperature measurement in the high and low regions. So I spent a lot part of my life making measurements, and especially temperature, okay? Everything in this room has a different temperature depending on, this one's 70, this one says 91. Wait a minute, I thought my body was 98.6. No, it isn't. It depends how much heat energy is taken from my skin to the environment. So you can talk about the temperature of the air for one thing, but the temperature of the environment depends on how much energy is stolen from your body because you're going to radiate to it. I'm going to run out of time. I'll sit down and recommend 55 degrees. Why not give it a try for X months?
Thank you.
Lydia and then Carol Zanin.
Person that was homeless, had a 12-year-old daughter being homeless. I know that it gets really cold outside. my daughter got really sick being outside. It's important to have a place like this where you can go and, you know, be able to get out of the elements. So I just hope you guys can do something about it, because it's very important for people like me that struggle and stuff like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carol Zanin, and then our last speaker is Lisa Torres.
Opportunity, I just basically want to be in support of the Haven of Hope and the efforts that they are making to try to provide a warming center and whatever else they can do to help our very needy population. Of course, the most wonderful thing is to get housing for them, but if we can do this warming center, it's something. And I do believe that when it's 60 outside, but it's raining and it's windy, I'm freezing to my bones. And I don't know how someone elderly, well, I'm kind of old, but someone older than myself and sick, much more in horrible physical condition, I don't know how they can stand it. And especially some of the people that are homeless also have little children with them. So I think that 55 is great, or 60. Thank you.
Lisa Torres.
Mayor Chuck Reynolds, Vice Mayor. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I am in favor of the Warming Center. As a volunteer, I put my time and effort into volunteering at the Warming Center that we have for the Haven of Hope. And, you know, the people that come in there, you know, you get to talk to them, you have conversation with them, and, you know, they are grateful and they appreciate the fact that they can have a place to come out of the cold. We also, you know, we get the opportunity to provide that. You know, everybody's saying 43, 44, 45, but all last week, our temperatures were various. You know, one day it would be nice, and then it would be raining, you know, then it would be cold, you know, so we can't really put a set temperature-wise because it's going up and down. We don't know if it's going to rain from one day to the next. But we do know that if we do have an available space for them to do come and to have coffee and to have, you know, a meal and to be able to sit down and have a place to watch TV and be out of the cold, you know, I think this is a good thing. We want to go forward. We want to show our hearts and we want to show that we do care. You know, people go through circumstances. Not everybody is fortunate to have the stability that all of us in this room may have. You know, some of us may not have stability, but we do have more stability than those that come in and need help. You know, and me, for myself, I was once homeless. I know what it is and I know what it feels like to be homeless. I know what it feels like to be on the street. You know, and I just thank God. You know, I thank God that someone reached out and helped me. You know, and that's where I guess my heart comes from, to help others, because I've been there. I've done that. And look how far God has brought me. I have a very good job right now. My kids, my grandkids. You know, and I couldn't do that if I didn't have the help and support of other people that were willing to go out of their way and reach out and help and volunteer for certain services. Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Again, I'd like to clarify that we're not, these ministries are the ones with the heart to minister. Nobody's saying that you can't be open 365 nights a year. We're just saying when we're going to pay for it. So minister away. I mean, use your ministry hearts, and by all means, bring the people in for shelter. But we can only pay for it in certain circumstances. So that's what we're here to establish. Nobody's denying that people need shelter. We have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that there are guidelines and things are maintained. There's a lot of people here that have been ministering for years, and by all means, we're not telling you to stop. We're just saying when we're going to pay for it. So do I have any comments from the dais? Councilmember Smith.
I'd like to start with a question. Mr. Legron, what is the budget currently allocated to this type of an endeavor?
We have no budget for this. This comes from fund balance.
Councilmember Hatley.
Thank you. How much is in the fund balance? Because that was my question, but
Well, currently, fund balance is, unallocated fund balance is around 7 million.
7 million?
Yes, sir.
But to answer your question, we're in the hole with the budget on this because we don't have a fund balance.
Right, if the council establishes parameters that require budgeting, we'll have to come back to the council with a budget adjustment to create a budget, because right now there is no budget.
Councilmember Draper.
Mr. Legrone, would you repeat what Chico's guidelines are? I know it was 45 degrees, but then it was mitigated by wind or various things. Could you repeat that part?
Yes, ma'am. Chico has a temperature, if the temperature is under 45 degrees combined with 3/4 of an inch of rain or more precipitation, and if temperatures are under 40 degrees combined with an average wind speed of 15 miles per hour or more.
Okay, with an average wind speed of how much again?
15 miles per hour or more.
15. Okay, thank you. I think that one sounds really good, but depends on everybody
Well, I would
else.
like to say that with, for a wind chill factor, with wind speed for every mile an hour, you lose a degree, so it would actually be 30 degrees and 3/4 of an inch of rain. Councilmember Goodson.
Now that I've heard those stats reiterated, I don't believe there's any reason why we need to reinvent the wheel. And I think that Chico has done a good job. They have warming centers, safe spaces. They've connected the dots. So I would just defer to using their recommendations and moving forward.
Are there any more comments from the dais? Vice Mayor Thompson.
Nice. You're on it with the mic. That's great. Or did it go automatically, or has it? Thanks.
Push it.
I'm fine with that as far as Chico guidelines. My stipulation is this and regarding these warming centers, and I've talked to Chief about this morning, would be setting some kind of parameter with the different warming centers or centers that are out there. I recommend something that'd be along the lines of per head. And people who come in, I know that already the Haven of Hope, when people come in, they register correctly? Correct? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Oh, it's okay. I just already know that that's there, just confirming. So which is great. So having people come in and sign in, because if you have a warming center that's open, this warming center that's open, and they have one person, another warming center that's open, and they have 50, I think that having a minimum and then a per head type thing would be better, as opposed to, because I know that like the Mission has been doing this, you said 22 years?
Mission's been doing it 55.
Okay, but you've been there for that long, and so you've been operating without city funds for that long, and you have not strong-armed the city into funding your operation, which I appreciate. You've been a great ministry to the city. So having you being there and doing that for so long, I would say make it even for everyone and have some kind of a system to where they can be compensated. Because again, having one center open and others doing the same thing but not being compensated, something needs to be leveled out. Just making it even for everybody. But as far as the guidelines for temperature, if that's the main topic for tonight, I am fine with Chico's. That way, it's just straight across the board for the county.
I think that that's a lot of contributing factors with Chico's guidelines. I think you have to be part meteorologist to meet those guidelines. You certainly have to have somebody qualified figuring it out. So here's what we set, and this is what was set the other day. And I'm fine with this. The hours for operation for this warming center will be, well, this was very specific to a one-time emergency situation, and it was January 16th where it was going to be around 30, 32 degrees. We approved it for one night because the weather was unusual. And so I'm going to go ahead and read this letter that was, this is actually a press release. City-sponsored warming center, Oroville, California, January 16th, 2020. Recognizing the weather conditions, the City of Oroville and the Haven of Hope Resource Center are partnering to provide a warming center. The warming center will be located at the Haven of Hope Resource Center, located at 3010 Myers Street in Oroville. The warming center is open to all, and the city encourages the citizens to utilize the center. The hours of operation for this warming center will be today, January 16th at 6 p.m. until sunrise, January 17th, 2020. Warming centers will be provided if temperatures drop below 40 degrees and the rain continues. Please make every attempt to stay safe in the upcoming weather conditions. So having approved this for one night and having it continue on for 5 nights before anyone on the council was made aware of it, I would like to be clear that there needs to be guidelines that we need to follow and we're not saying that your ministry can't minister. By all means, bring people in out of the weather, keep them warm. We're just saying when we're going to pay for it. And it was very clear in these stipulations when the city was going to pay for it. So that's my recommendation, is that we go with the original recommendation. I don't think that we ought to get off into the complicated weeds of what Chico is doing with wind chill factors and precipitation percentages and barometers and all these things. I think it needs to be very simple. And 40 degrees and raining seems reasonable to me. Councilmember Pittman.
Yeah, I would essentially agree with that. I just add a little clearer definition: 40 degrees, raining, and then anytime the National Weather Service's wind chill chart indicates below 40 degrees. And that's done by them. They do all the calculations, they do all the figuring. You can go to the National Weather Service any time of the day on your phone, and it'll tell you what the wind chill is. So that way we just say 40 degrees and/or wind chill factor 40 or below, and that just be simple.
Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I just want to echo part of the sentiment with the established various nonprofits we have. I mean, I personally was a part of that industry for many, many years, and as just a point in case, I serviced between 500 and 1,000 people a month for 14 years in the Bay Area. So I know a thing or two about feeding a lot of people and clothing a lot of people. And that being said, all of the nonprofits did it on their own budget. I never took a dime of government funding, and that's just something we did through the fundraising efforts, private fundraising efforts, just like the mission has done. And I think that they don't get enough recognition for the good work that they do in our community. So first of all, I just put out I think just a challenge to whether it's a church or the YMCA or the Girls and Boys Club. There's many, many different agencies that service the more challenged in our community. And so part of this is just let's step it up if we are recognizing a real need and concern. And it goes beyond just when the weather's cold. We all know that there are a variety of factors that can affect any one of us. And I was just reviewing the National Weather Service, their documentation, and there's lots of criteria that triggers a warning to the public, not just cold temperature, but severe wind, severe rain events. So to add to the conversation, I think that if the city is going to step up and assist several of our nonprofits here in our community, then we have to it has to be kind of over and above the normal daily operations that I think that many of them already do, going without even recognition. There are, and I'm personally aware of multiple nonprofits here in our community that already do this without looking for any additional assistance. But that being said, I think there's a need here. And so as I look at the National Weather Service, they issue, and you don't have to do the math. There's no calculating here of how fast the wind, the National Weather Service issues a freeze warning. They issue a wind advisory, pops up right on the computer. If you go to the NOAAweather.com, and there it is. So I think I think staff ought to come back with some criteria, looking at those various alerts to the general public when something is pending that could put any one of us in peril, and then those triggers. Then we have to say, what then is the budget? We have to establish an annual budget. How much are we going to spend, and then how many days are we going to allocate towards this? And then we can I think would be appropriate to issue an RFP. And then if there are multiple agencies, whether it's religious or not, then they can make application for these dollars and then extend their services. As you pointed out, any church can open up their doors. Many churches have areas that are appropriate for that, or other types of institutions that do wonderful work. And if we're going to come alongside a few of them to offer these additional support, then I think we need to have that criteria. Budget, what are we going to spend? Then what's going to be those triggers? And then who is it that's going to make application? And then we have that contractual arrangement agreement with those various, perhaps several agencies to provide those services. So I think we just need to dig a little deeper on this and be thoughtful. Additionally, I think the city should look into the COC as a collaborative applicant. Perhaps that's something we need to pursue. Going back to the other city council that some of those that are on the dais here today sat on, there was issued a shelter crisis. I sat right out there where you're all sitting this evening, listening, and there was a promise made that if that declaration was made, that there would be millions of dollars potentially that would flood into the city to help us with these concerns that we're talking about here today. So the COC exists, and I think the city should look into, maybe there aren't any dollars available, maybe that won't work, but I think it's worthy of a phone call or a contact made to Mr. Taylor, Don Taylor, who's now with the county of Butte, that is managing the COC. And let's see if there's any dollars that potentially we could leverage to help with this concern. But I don't think that tonight, I think, in my opinion, I think we need to give it back to you as I think, what I understand, some direction.
Staff is looking for direction.
Yeah, so that
That's
would
why
be
we're
my
here.
input. What's an appropriate budget? Can we leverage additional dollars out of the COC, going back to the shelter crisis declared 2 years ago by the previous council? And then what would an RFP look like with the nonprofits? Is that even appropriate with a religious organization? I don't know. And then again, just to reiterate, and a challenge to all of our nonprofits in our community to do great work. And again, there's many silent heroes that are perhaps even in this room here. And I applaud the mission for what they've done for over 50 years. It's can be difficult work, challenging work, but it's very rewarding when you know you've made a difference in an individual's life and saved somebody from peril. There's a lot of just personal gratification that goes into that, and so we want to acknowledge the heroes in our community. They're doing great work that probably just don't get enough recognition. So from me, thank you. I understand and appreciate it. It's good stuff, but we have to figure this out from a government standpoint. How much we're going to come alongside and bring this additional assistance. I think I've said enough.
Thank you. Again, we're just here to establish at what level the city is going to get involved. No one's stopping anyone from ministering. So please minister, but we can't always step in and pay for it. So looking for a motion. Oh, and I would like to make a point that Chico's stipulations with the wind chill factors and the rain are a lot stricter than the ones that we have presented. So personally, I'm inclined to go with what we're recommending. Looking for a motion.
I make a motion that we line up with Chico. They're already, you can figure out how they monitor the, I'm just like Mr. Pittman said, Councilmember Pittman said, that there's data on some weather service. But sounds like we've already kind of said that sounds good.
I'll second that if that's a motion.
That's a motion.
Okay.
Before I vote, I want to make it very clear that these stipulations are stricter than the ones that we had presented. So I don't want anybody thinking that, so I'll vote for it. But I just want to let you know that with that wind chill factor, that's 30 degrees. Each mile per hour is a degree. Okay, so if you've got, it's 50 degrees and then 10 mile an hour wind, 10 degree chill factor is 40 degrees. So that's not yet down to 25 degrees actually.
Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, just for a moment, I'd just like to take a moment and introduce our new Community Development Assistant City Administrator, Mr. Leo DiPaolo, based upon the council's actions tonight. And I'd also like to take a moment and introduce Dawn Nevers, if she would stand up, please. She's trying to hide in the back. Welcome.
And for Leo as well.
Yeah, welcome both of you. I think we have a pretty strong team here. We've been building it for a while now, and it's two wonderful additions. So thank you. Vice Mayor Thompson, did you wish to speak?
I did. Just to clarify, I always still want to call you Chief Legrone, Mr. Legrone. So from here, is there going to be an RFP released for any entity that would like to provide? And from there, what are your thoughts, or what's the direction that the council has in regarding? I mean, we've set the temperature stipulations, but now from there, guidelines and whatnot.
Well, where we go from here, the first thing we're gonna have to do is work with Director Wright and Director Duncan, and establish a budget for this and bring it back to council. I think the second thing we need to do is bring back a potential RFP, because before we turn around, it's going to warm back up and we're gonna need the services of a cooling center. So I think we need to put something out there so we have some process and something in place, so as these things happen, it doesn't become a for lack of a better term, a crash program and a chaotic event. I mean, so what we'll do is we'll put together some sort of an RFP, and we will bring it back for the council to provide input as far as guidelines, now whether you want to do it by a per day basis or a per head count, and what the parameters for the operation of those centers should be. And then it will be released. I mean, that's, and we'll see what we get back.
Thank you. If we're going to have centers, I would like to be, again, I've already said it, but some kind of a head count, especially if there's going to be possibly two different centers operating.
I think that would probably, if you're going to do something like that, that would be most likely the most fair way to go about it, because otherwise you could end up with 6 different centers open and it could become extremely expensive. So if we did it by per head, that may be a better way to do it.
Per head or rotation.
We need to put it out there and see what we get back.
Go ahead.
Just my thought would be a base number, because if somebody has their doors open and nobody shows up, at least they had the doors open, so there should be at least a base cost, but then from there, per head.
Right. I think that's, if we put it out there, I think our providers are, they do an amazingly good job with a minimal amount of dollars, and they'll come back with probably some interesting options that we haven't even considered.
Pardon me, I don't mean to interrupt. I just ran quick numbers just for the sake of this. If you had a space, we were at 300 a day prior. If you had a space that held 20 people, that's $15 a head. If you housed 100 people, if more people got involved on the 60 coldest days, which is 15 days a month over the 4 coldest months, you're looking about $90,000. So just to get an idea on the scale of where that can go in a hurry. So.
All right, Leo, quit showing off. No, thank you very much. Yeah, and we don't want, I could see and I'm sorry, but I could always see the other end of stuff. Having people, cramming people into places to get a head count and violating fire marshal laws and everything else. So we have to take all these things into consideration. Again, I want to be really clear about this. Warming centers are not shelters. They shall not have beds. They shall not have showering facilities. They are for you to come in out of the weather and warm up. There can be activities, TV, games, meal, things like that. But there will be no sleeping. You could fall asleep, but you just can't have a bed to do it in. I'm sorry, that's a complete different set of rules, and we have to stay with the guidelines. We can't blur the lines. Councilmember Smith, would you like to speak again?
Yeah. My number was 73,500 if we followed the 50 degree or lower.
Wow.
Yeah. I like you. But
I'd like to get a clarification, Administrator Legron, about what the stipulations are that we voted on.
The stipulations that you voted on are to adopt the Chico guidelines.
Yes, I'd like to know what they are.
It is 45 degrees with 3/4 combined with 3/4 of an inch of rain, or 40 degrees and a sustained wind factor of 15 miles per hour or more.
Okay, I just want to be clear about what that looks like.
Yeah, no,
That's
it's the
a
same
monsoon at 30 degrees. All right.
yeah, and just to follow up further with what I was saying, I'm not real comfortable with the count per se because of the nature of monitoring that and trying to document that. To me, it would be very, very challenging. I know several of the agencies are what they call HMIS compliant. I know the mission is working on that with the COC. In fact, they got some dollars to put that together. Is the Hope Center, are you guys HMIS compliant? Josh? No? How about you guys? Okay. So there's some criteria that do hard counts that you're, it's a professional monitoring system. I'd be more comfortable if the RFP agency was HMIS compliant, and then we could use those numbers. I think I'd be good with that because that's official. You have to record that. But just to kind of arbitrarily do that, I mean, somebody goes in one door out there. I mean, I could just see that being very, very challenging. Just knowing the nature and being in that business personally, I'm not quite sure how you could completely qualify that. But that's just my comment on it.
We will bring this back on the first meeting in March. It'll be a rough draft of what we're going to release, and at that time we can tune that up and add those comments that you feel are most appropriate for release.
All right, thank you. If there are no more speakers, this meeting's adjourned. We will